Okay, but guys, just to say, as mentioned, the nice warm introduction, my name's Amy. So I do work with Marine Dynamics as part of their guiding team. So my main role is assisting with the biology as well as the efforts when it does come to conservation. So that can be as simple as talking to the guests that we have on the boat. Specifically, I'm very loyal to our sharks in the area, so I work as part of the shark cage diving team. But we educate guests, continue our data collection through this, and all of this does inform our work when it comes to the marine life that we do have in the area. So, as mentioned by Hein, I'm going to talk through our various aspects when it does come to the importance of the ocean as a wider ecosystem. And then also when it does come to our area specifically, I'll tell you a little bit more about our local area as well. But yeah, when it comes to marine dynamics, this was a very humble beginning in the 2000s. So currently this year we have had a fantastic milestone. So we celebrated 25 years of whale watching as well as 20 years of shark cage diving now. We also do have 20 years of conservation work through our non-profit sector. So that is our Dyer Island Conservation Trust. And with that, we do have an additional initiative. This is our African Penguin and Seabird Sanctuary. So we're currently celebrating 10 years of this year. So you can see a lot of progress has been made, and there's lots of various efforts that go into protecting what we do have within our ecosystem. But we do operate in a way that is defined as ecotourism. So we do have our environment at the front of our mind, at the front of our practices. And we have been awarded blue flag status, have been done so for a number of years. And we also do operate as a fair trade tourism company as well. So not only as guides and crew are we treated fantastically, but it does mean that we do prioritize the health of the ecosystem and also the protection of the area that we are working with from that point. But a very important person to discuss is our CEO. So this is a very, very passionate man. His name is Wilfred Chivel, and his first whale watching vessel was purchased in 2000. And as I've mentioned, we're now well into a couple of decades of fantastic work, all through the hard work of Wilfred. And he wasn't someone who had a background in biology. He wasn't someone who was working on the sea day in, day out, but he did use it for livelihood. So he's lived in Gansbaai his entire life. So in terms of his familiarity with the environment, what there is to offer, definitely something that he knew like the back of his hand, and he still knows and learns a lot today as well. So he saw essentially a market where it came to whale watching, but decided to take it a step further. Once you're out on the water, day in and day out, you start asking questions. You see certain bits of behavior, and it does spark a new love and a new interest. And of course, the more you learn, the better you can conserve from that point. So that is the whole ethos that Marine Dynamics has been built on from this point as well. So he not only established Marine Dynamics for the purpose of whale watching and then shark cage diving around 5 years later, but through those 5 years, he then made the non-profit organization, our trust, to help incorporate science into the work that we were doing as well. So we were able to establish a good conservation regime, and from that have multiple successes, which I will talk you guys through in a second as well. But of course, I'm sitting in pretty much a different hemisphere to you guys. So good morning from my side. I'm sure it's afternoon for you now. But just a little bit of context as to where we are. So I'm currently in Gansbaai, South Africa. So it's marked just towards the bottom of the map. And as mentioned by Hein, it's a very unique coastline. So along the west coast, over on the left-hand side, we do have our Atlantic Ocean. So this is where we have the influence of the Benguela Current. So in terms of its temperature, it's pretty cold. Our diving is definitely not warm. Multiple wetsuits, around 6 to 8 millimeters, so you can stay in the water, have an extended dive time. But if you make your way up towards the east coast, that's where we do have an environmental change due to a different current, and that is our Agulhas Current. So that is warmer in temperature. So just along our stretch of coastline, we have a temperate environment. So that's what we call when we have our cooler waters. But if you make your way up to the side, we do start experiencing some subtropical waters. But this does mean in terms of South African species and the different animals that do grace our coastlines, it is very diverse. And of course, there will be big differences between the two coastlines as well. A lot of our species are what we call endemic. So it means that they only exist across our coastline, and that is limited by the various conditions that they do have. But when you have species that are endemic, it means you really have to conserve that coastline that is right there within their habitat, as they don't really have the capability to survive anywhere else. So it does increase their vulnerability to any threats, specifically the ones when it does come to human interactions as well. But zooming in even more, so this is our local ecosystem, so our Daya Island ecosystem. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the terrestrial marine big five that you think of when you have safaris. But for us here, we have our marine big five. And this is pretty much the only place in the world where you can find this. So that does constitute of dolphin species, whale species, our African penguins, Cape fur seals, and then of course the sharks that we have in the area as well. So the larger island that you see over on the left-hand side, this is Daya Island. So this is home to our African penguin colony, and this is the only species of penguin you can find in Africa, and we're very lucky to have them just here on our doorstep. There are 3 colonies that can be found within South Africa, one that is up in Namibia as well. And then just over to the right-hand side, you can see another smaller rock, and that is Giza Rock. That is where you can find our Cape fur seals. So we do have a colony consisting of around 40 to 60,000, dependent on the time of the year. This does fluctuate. We do our biannual seal counts as well. So we'll count all the seal pups and have some estimates just to understand how many are making use of that area. But being only 2 hectares in size, it is very heavily populated. So the expanse of water that you can see between those 2 islands is known as Shark Alley. So this is one of the most iconic shark cage diving sites pretty much throughout the world. So during our early 2000 operations, that is where we did our shark cage diving. There was a lot of work done with National Geographic and Discovery, specifically for Shark Week, which for us is one of the best weeks within the year. But a lot of behavior in terms of their predation techniques, how they utilize the area, it was discovered within this region. But now, due to seasonal changes, we are operating in a shallower region called Ubashtam. So that's just a little bit further down the coastline, a little closer to the shore, rather than between these 2 different islands as well. But I'll dive into the different species we have when we get a little bit more specific to our species that we have. But guys, just to take a step out and look at our oceans as a whole when it comes to the global impact. So we do describe our oceans as the planet's blue lungs. So a lot of association when it does come to the work that is being done in terms of oxygen production is thought to be from terrestrial trees and plants. It's what we see, it's what we know, it's what we've been taught. But when it comes to our oceans, they cover a pretty big part of our ocean surface and our planet's surface. So around 70% of the surface area of our planet is covered by our oceans. And in terms of fresh water and our seas, 97% of that water is made up of our oceans. So it's a very, very small percentage that is actually fresh water. And we do account our oceans and we hold a thanks essentially when it does come to our breathing. So every second breath we take is made by our oceans, and the total production can vary from 50 to 75% of all the oxygen that we do have within our planet as well. And the main thing that does allow this is tiny single-celled organisms that are called phytoplankton. So just like terrestrial plants and trees, these are the base of the food web. So we would essentially describe them as the building blocks. They are the bottom of the food web, and what we call them is autotrophic, meaning that they do create their own food. So just like the regular process of photosynthesis, they take in carbon dioxide, utilize different minerals, and they will utilize that to make their own food. So that is why they are the base of the food chain. They aren't relying on any other species to get their energy intake. It is the breakdown of those products that allows them to produce some glucose and sugars for themselves. And of course, a very, very important byproduct of photosynthesis is that oxygen that is so vital to our life here on planet Earth. Naturally, being photosynthetic, they do require well-lit environments. They need that light in order to be able to create that food. So they will reside in what we call the eutrophic zone. So that is the shallow region of our oceans where there is sufficient light in order for them to be able to photosynthesize. So typically that won't be much deeper than 200 meters. It will be dependent also on where they are within our oceans as well, how close they are to the hemisphere and that sun exposure too. But when it comes to phytoplankton, even though they are producing over 50% of our world's oxygen, they only account for 1% of our global plant mass. So it's not a huge sort of distribution when it comes to this, but what does allow them to have good adjustment to this is that they are very widespread across our oceans. And of course, as mentioned, those oceans, they're covering a very significant surface area of our planet's surface. And when it comes to their reproduction and how often they are turning over, in comparison to terrestrial trees, they can take just days to be made up again, as opposed to decades when a tree is at a stage that it's viably producing enough oxygen to have and hold significance. But we will see a wider spatial spread and also reduced exposure to any seasonal variations. Being in the ocean, it tends to be a little bit more stable throughout our regular seasons as we make our way through the year. So in terms of their productivity, it does hold good space. We won't see that autumnal loss of leaves or anything like that as you would expect on land. So it is meaning they're able to operate throughout the entire year and keep working, keep producing that oxygen for us as well. But going a little bit more into detail as to how they do this as well. So they're not only important to our carbon cycle, but also our nutrient cycle as well. So they do hold a very important part when it comes to maintaining our balance within our local climate and also mitigating climate change in a natural way that we aren't supporting or helping and aiding. But with photosynthesis, it does take inorganic carbon and converts them to organic compounds within our waters as well. So already just that absorption of the carbon dioxide is removing one of the biggest greenhouse gases when it does come to the contribution of global warming. And it's just these natural organisms that are doing this. A lot of plankton as well will utilize carbon to produce limestone protection. So that will be their hard external shell. Lots of corals do this too, and for any mollusks, they do utilize that calcium carbonate and they are going to create their hard exteriors too. But it's not just that process of the absorption as well. So they do help cycle a lot of nutrients within the ocean environment too, specifically when they start sinking. So upon their death, they will start sinking down towards deeper waters. And with that sinking, all that carbon that they have absorbed, they're taking it with them. They're taking it to the bottom of the ocean. And that is where we are able to have a lot of carbon sequestration. So that means the storing of carbon, and the ocean is a very, very big factor when it comes to storing a lot of that carbon, specifically within those deep seas. So that carbon storage will be done by a process of sedimentation. So it's forming part of our seafloor as well. But when they take up and they transform, they recycle all of these elements, it does help cycle them between the species. So we already spoke about how our different phytoplankton species are the basis of our food web. Of course, that carbon is then ingested by other species. And for all of us, we are made of carbon. It is one of the most present compounds throughout our planet. So that is cycled then through our food web and makes its way up to the apex predators that are sitting right on top of that food chain as well. And with our oceans, they can be described as deserts sometimes. So especially when it comes to deeper waters, the open ocean, there's not a lot of marine life in terms of algae growing around on the seafloor or suspended particles within the water. So These phytoplankton, they are essentially paramount to making sure animals that are staying within those deep waters are able to survive. So they will scavenge and release different vitamins, other micronutrients, and that is going to help sustain other marine life within that area as well. And most of those high seas, those deeper waters, they are used as migratory corridors for a lot of larger animals such as whales, some even shark species. And they are going to continue just supporting the entire ocean basis. So you can see really the importance that does lie within our phytoplankton and within our wider ocean ecosystem when it comes to reducing the harmful effects of our greenhouse gases and making sure that there is that nutrient cycle that allows our oceans to survive, and as a direct result, us as well, because we are extremely reliant on these different environments. But based off this, with marine dynamics, we now see the full value when it comes to the protection of not only our ocean environment, but also the animals that do consist within it. So through our work that we do operate with 3 key values. So that is to discover, we understand our ecosystem, we learn more about it, its inhabitants, and this is done directly through data collection and specified research efforts as well. From this point, we can then protect. Of course, the more you know, the better you can conserve. And when it comes to conservation, it's very important to have evidence-based data. So you can say this exactly is what's happening. This is what we're seeing. This is the changes that need to happen. And this is how it's further going to benefit us. So from that point, with our changes, we're able to then educate. So that goes beyond just the clients that we do have on our vessels, but rather any partnerships that we do have, any of our agencies, of course, our clients. And one of the sectors that do operate within marine dynamics is our academy. So we have regular volunteers and interns that come through, and they work directly day in, day out with our oceans and the associated ecosystems, just to ensure and put down a value of protection and understanding. So that goes beyond just our local area, but we do hope with them being international, coming from various places, that is a practice they take home with them, passing the message as it's not just the work that we want done here. We do need a global effort when it comes to protection of our oceanic ecosystems as well. But going into my favorite topic, so I'm going to chat a little bit about the sharks that we do have here within Gansbaai. And the reason I want to talk about our sharks is because they are what we like to nickname as the doctors of our ocean. So here within our local waters, we have around 30 different species of sharks. And those go from the smallest individuals, our cat sharks and our shy sharks, reaching between 40 to 60 centimeters in size, and then making its way up to one of the most iconic species within our waters, and that is our great white shark. So when it comes to our shark cage diving vessels, we'll see only a fraction of the sharks within our area, and that is our bronze whaler sharks. So these are a coastal species. They do reside between temperate and subtropical environments. So we will see local migrations along the South African coastline. But they grow to around 3.5 meters in size, and they have become the stars of our bay. So these are typically the individuals we'll see day in and day out. And one of my favorite things about them is they do have a schooling predation tactic. So that does mean we have the opportunity to view more than one individual whilst we're out on the boat. And that is specifically to the point where they are predating on a lot of smaller fish species. So with mullet, anchovies, pilchard, sardine, a lot of these fish do form bait balls. So they will collect nice and tight, nice and compact, and with multiple sharks helping predate on that one bait ball, they do keep it within a confined space so they can go through, get mouthfuls of fish, have improved feeding success with less effort. So working together, they'll ensure that they do have a sufficient feeding source. We do also then have the broad-nosed seven-gills, so they're also nicknamed cow sharks. Very prehistoric looking individuals, cute little smiles on their faces, and essentially that is the original prototype when it does come to a lot of shark species. And luckily enough for them, with 7 gill slits as opposed to the regular 5 that most other shark species do have, they do hold a Guinness World Record when it does come to this, so a little title to their name. and then naturally our great white sharks as well. But this was something that we did see a change within our ecosystem, but I will delve into that in a second. But as mentioned with sharks, they do sit at the top of the food chain, so they monitor everything underneath them. Healthy oceans do have the presence of sharks. Sylvia Earle has said, if you're in the water and you see a shark, consider yourself lucky, because that means you do have a healthy environment. You do have a healthy ecosystem that is well in balance. So what they'll do is feed on any weaker individuals, any sicker individuals of their prey items. So that does mean for any of the individuals that are left when it does come to those prey species, they are going to mate, they're going to hold a lot of genetic diversity. It's going to be the healthier individuals. Those fish are then going to do the exact same for the lower food chain level, and it's going to knock down all the way to the bottom of the food chain. So these sharks are directly responsible for making sure this food web is within balance, and we do see changes when sharks leave areas. There will be changes and pressures that are put onto lower changes within that food web as well. So this is why it is such a big priority when it does come to collecting data on our shark species and helping people to understand that they are not a threat to us. They are actually vital to our survival due to that factor that they play in that oceanic health as well. But unfortunately for sharks, there are a lot of threats that do face them, and now as it does stand in our current day, over a third of our global shark species are threatened with extinction. So considering they have been around longer than trees, longer than dinosaurs, they have survived 5 mass extinctions. It is a major shame that we are now sitting at a time in history where we can lose over a third of the various individuals that we do have across our oceans in the world. But majority of these factors are as a result of human actions, as is most of the threats when it does come to our natural environment. So there is targeted fishing for the fin and the meat trade. Unfortunately, here within South Africa, the bronze whalers, they are commercially fished. So it is legal to kill these animals for the purpose of their meat consumption and have these products exported out of the country. Unfortunately, when it does come to wider markets as well, there is still a demand with the fin trade. It's seen as a delicacy, and when it comes to consumption of shark meat, it's really not in our best interest to be consuming this. Being apex predators, there is a process called bioaccumulation. So it does mean that there can be some harmful chemicals within their meat that is going to be damaging to our health. So one example is mercury. Some shark species do contain up to 40 times more mercury than we should ever ingest. So you can risk mercury poisoning, and there is that release of ammonia after a shark has been sitting around for a while as well. So definitely some factors to take into account if you are considering shark as a meal. But there are also then the accidental practices. So bycatch is any waste animal that is collected through the fishing industry. So this is specifically through non-selective methods such as trawling and longlining. So for trawling, it's just a massive net, and there's going to be these metal bars that are based along the bottom of that net. These nets are not small. They are hundreds of kilometers in size. They are absolutely massive. And what they'll do is be dropped down along our seabed, and then that is going to drag and pull up anything and everything that is within its way. Most of the time, they're only trying to focus on one species, but you can imagine the huge expanse of this net. It's going to be pulling up a lot more individuals, and it's not just our sharks. There'll also be some more of the charismatic animals such as dolphins, turtles, and definitely some other smaller individuals too. So very, very damaging when it does come to that point. And for majority of that bycatch, it will just be discarded to the side. So it's not a case of, oh, we caught the wrong thing, we'll reuse it in this way. It is a completely unsustainable way to collect your fish sources. And there are a lot of animals that do see the effects of this. And then of course we do have longlining. So that is where we'll see these baited hooks, again, kilometers worth of line that are dropped out into the ocean, specifically within the pelagic zone, and a lot of shark species will die as a result of this, being caught up on those hooks and facing a death as a result of this. A major issue we do have here in South Africa is the fact that the Natal Shark Board does still allow the use of drum lines and these shark nets within the KwaZulu-Natal region. So that is a little bit further up towards the east coast, where I mentioned we have our subtropical environment. But a lot of these animals are facing a death. And recently, there was a tagging initiative within Mossel Bay. They did tag multiple great white shark individuals around a month ago. And over the last 2 days, it has been reported that one of the great white sharks that was tagged within Mossel Bay has now died as a result of the shark nets. So it is seen clear in day, plain sight, even through research efforts, that a shark that we were hoping to get vital information from, learn about their migratory patterns, only made its way up along the coastline to be killed by one of these nets. And they have been found to be not the most effective in keeping sharks away from beaches anyway, and it does cause a lot of unnecessary deaths. So the sharks get entangled within these nets. For a lot of the larger species, they do swim and have to keep swimming in order to stay alive. So it is a process that we call ram ventilation. So as the sharks continue to swim through the water, there is a process of that water passing over their gills. The oxygen within the water will then transfer through capillaries into their bloodstream, and that is how they stay alive. So if they are to be held in one place at one time, or their swimming pattern is disrupted, it will lead to the death of the shark. So sharks can drown, and they do drown as a direct result of these nets. Naturally, they're not only seeing the results of the trawling and longlining through the direct death of the species themselves, but also the removal of their food sources. So there is a very big competition when it comes to sharing our food resources of different fish species, growing populations worldwide. There is increasing pressure and also a decrease in how well these fish are being able to reproduce and stay maintained within the wider environment. So a lot of shark species are being pushed further, having to move further for these food sources that of course they do rely on for their survival. Naturally, climate change can either affect the distribution of the sharks or the distribution of their prey items. And with a lot of shark species too, their chemical processes are very reliant on the surrounding environment's temperature. So they will be what we call ectothermic. So it means they don't regulate their own body temperature. So they are reliant on the surrounding environment to control their digestion as well as their reproductive capabilities. So with most of us and all living things, we are made out of proteins. When it comes to proteins, they are affected by heat. So if you're having a change in your temperature, it does mean there may be some disruption of these proteins, and these chemical processes will then be majorly stunted as a result of that changing environment. So when it comes to warming waters, moving individuals out of the area, this is one of the factors that have to be considered when it comes to the survival of a lot of sharks. And then one of my least favorite things that sharks are killed for is their squalene oil. So this is an oil that is found within the liver of sharks. So it is thought to have anti-aging properties, and it is still widely used within cosmetics. So think about your sun creams, your foundation, lipstick. This squalene oil is widely utilized within these various cosmetic products, and it is a very unnecessary death. Squalene can be found within plant-based matters. It can be identified and retrieved from different algae as well. So I will point out, if you're out grabbing any of your local moisturizers, if you're in the shops, just keep an eye out for that squalene. So make sure when you're purchasing a product and it says squalene on it, that it does have either vegan or animal cruelty free on that packaging as well. That is how you will know it is a plant-based squalene product as opposed to retrieved from the liver of sharks, having caused an unnecessary death for one of our most important ocean protectors as well. But there are a few natural threats to our sharks as well. So here within South Africa, specifically within Gansbaai, we had some pretty groundbreaking interactions between different individuals within our ecosystem. And to specify within it, that was killer whales and our great white sharks. So we saw a major disruption in our white shark distribution as a result of orcas starting to kill white sharks, again, for the purpose of their liver. So when it comes to a great white shark, their liver does constitute around 2/3 of their body cavity. It is a massive organ. As mentioned, it's very nutrient rich. There's a lot of oil and fat that is stored within there. So in terms of getting the prime cut from a shark, orcas knew that liver is definitely what they want to be going for. But this was the first time this was witnessed anywhere within the world, specifically within such a local area. So it was just 2 killer whales nicknamed Port and Starboard. These two are very distinctive based on the fact their dorsal fins do drop over one and then the other side. So left and right, that is where these nicknames do come from. But we started seeing from 2017 white sharks washing up on the beaches around our local area. So this was all led in terms of the research by our alumni biologist, Alison Towner. She led all of the necropsies and the research when it came to this. And what was found with all of these sharks that were washed up was the fact that they were missing only their liver. There was a ventral slit along the bottom side of their body, almost surgical. So the body would open up like a flap. When it comes to the oil content within that liver, it does mean oil and water. That liver can just slip out, making it a very easy way to nab in and grab that liver for these killer whales. And also a little bit of forensics done, so you can see along the surface of the shark's body we would find what we call rake marks. So those are the teeth marks that are left by orcas. You can tell based on the size and the difference in between them that it was these orca individuals, and it did cause a major disruption within our white shark distribution here within Gansbaai and also the wider coast. So we weren't just the only ones who were affected. Mossel Bay also saw a decline as a result of this. These two orcas do make their way up and down the coast. South Africa does have a pretty broad orca population as well, one of the most diverse that you can find within the world. And this does mean that it is still an ongoing threat. We haven't had them within our bay since February 2023. But there have been sightings of them up and down, specifically our west coast as well. And unfortunately for our great white sharks, their response to this predation was to flee the area. So you can imagine you are the apex predator. Never before known was there someone who would be predating on our great white sharks, who are considered one of the most fierce animals within our oceans, and rightly so. They are fantastic predators. And there was a movement out of the area, and this was identified through any individuals that we had tagged, and they did have a bit of an eastward shift. But as mentioned, now it's been a good few years since we did have a predation along our coastlines, and our white shark population has still not recovered. So we mainly see our bronze whalers, as mentioned, day in, day out. But last year, we only had 5 sightings of great white sharks within our local area. And that is thought to be a long-lasting effect from these orcas, but then also those effects that we spoke about. So when it comes to the trawling and the long lining, these are fishing practices that do continue to happen within our deeper waters here within South Africa. And unfortunately, we're seeing a decline, and there hasn't been much of a recovery. We typically, on our day-to-day, will have smaller individuals if they do come through. So ranging from around 1.5 to 3 meters in size. So no longer these major iconic individuals that can reach around 5 meters or 6 meters, which is what used to be within the area. One of our skippers, he's been working within the shark cage diving industry for over 20 years. And where they would operate, some days they were struggling to find anchor points due to the fact there were so many white sharks within the water. So a major disruption to our ecosystem and the long-lasting effects that are happening as a result of these human interactions as well. But I spoke about we were able to see the movement of the white sharks out of the area through tagging. So we have what we call the acoustic tagging array platform, or ATAP for short. So this is one of our research initiatives that we do work closely with along the entire South African coastline. So behind Dyer Island, we do have 3 receivers, and this is just a small portion of the entire South African coastline that does constitute of 250 receivers, and that goes from False Bay all the way up to the Mozambican border. So it does cover the entire front. So as sharks or any other animals that do have an acoustic tag, typically situated just between their dorsal fin and their flank. As they move past these receivers, it will be picked up by that receiver. It's going to note down the date, the time, how many times that individual has swum past. So it does give us some insight into how long individuals are staying with the area, any seasonal differences between the species, and also the extent of their migration, which is very important when you're considering conservation as well. When you want to protect a local area, it's fantastic to have that protection right in front of your bay. But when you're working with migrational species, you do want to work with a wider platform, a wider area. And that is where a lot of this collaboration is vital to the survival of a lot of these species, to make sure that we're not only protecting them within a small area, that across the full coastline, they are receiving that same protection as well. But we will go out around every 6 months or so to go and collect these receivers. So we do utilize what we call a hydrophone. So we drop the hydrophone into the water. That does connect to the receiver. We send it a few different messages, a few different signals, and that will then cause the release of that receiver. So we can pick it up and download all of that data that is going to let us know what species we have in the area, how long they were with us, and any movements from that standard. So this was a very key indicator to letting us know that our white sharks had moved out of the area and fled as a result of that orca predation. But now we do utilize this for any other tagged species. There are a few bronze whalers that have some tags in them. Last year we did have an account of some eagle rays and also some pelagic fish making their way through. So a fantastic and fairly accessible way for us to understand what species are occupying the area and how long and where they are migrating between our South African coastline. But a little bit of work that we've done when it comes to the bronze whaler shark. So 2017 was pretty much the first time that we started sighting these individuals. So it wasn't a known species within the area. It took us by shock, and also we do owe it to them. They did save the shark cage diving industry, specifically here within Gansbaai. So a fantastic new species, but of course a lot to learn about them as well. For the past few years, we've been working with great white sharks. You have a new individual that comes through. Where have they come from? How many are we seeing? How are they utilizing this area? So every single trip that we go out on, specifically on the shark cage diving vessels, we do operate data collection. So we'll note down the different species that we see, how many individuals are within the area. We'll note down their sex, also any size comparison, so you can define it as juveniles are utilizing this area during these seasons, mature adults are found within this time. But we'll also be noting down our various oceanic conditions. So that will be our temperature, our dissolved oxygen, and then also the pressure that is within the water. So relating to these environmental factors, we're now trying to build a link between the abundance of the sharks in relation to the temperature and the dissolved oxygen as well. So long-term monitoring of this, we of course have almost a decade of this information now. So we're able to understand how these animals are utilizing our area, and also the perfect factors that are influencing whether they're in the area or not. And we have found that it is temperature and dissolved oxygen, as opposed to the chumming process, that will contribute as to whether the sharks are around the vessel or not. So naturally, when it comes to the shark cage diving industry, we do want sharks around the vessel, so we will utilize a chumming process. And this is done for us in the most responsible way possible. So we do not actively feed the sharks. It is simply smaller bits that are utilized in order to attract the individuals to the area. And that is not only for the sighting of our guests, but also directly contributes to the research that we're able to do. If we weren't out on our shark cage diving vessels operating the way we are every day, we would not know as much about these animals as we do now. And based on the work that we have done, we have now created a no shark catch zone around our wider Daya Island ecosystem. So we have reduced the pressure on these bronze whalers, who I did mention face commercial fishing practices, and this has changed the reality for these animals. So we are no longer operating our vessels and a few hundred meters off fishermen of pulling them out of the water. Instead, we're leaving them to be in our waters, and we were able to have a supply chain model contributed as well. So to show the benefits of ecotourism, how these sharks are vital in the waters. It contributes to not only our environment, but also the wider economy. So just by protecting these sharks and keeping them in our waters, we're helping to favor local hospitality, Cape Town tourism, South African tourism, and feed back into our local economy and the wider economy too, just by making sure that these sharks are not just priced per kilogram, but allowed to live the longevity of their life, maintain the ecosystem, but then also maintain the stability of our general community as well. But another surprise species that we did have is also our short-tailed stingray. So this is an elasmobrang species too. So sharks and stingrays are very close relatives of one another. So what they do share, one of their main features is their skeleton. It is what we describe as cartilaginous. So just like your nose and your ears, very lightweight, very flexible material. And these are some sightings that have started to increase over the past few years. Seeing that change in one of the largest predators moving out, it has created space for some of these other individuals to move through and expose us to a greater understanding of the individuals that can be found within our area. But currently, we are looking at photo identification when it comes to these short-tailed stingrays. So they are bottom dwellers. They're very important at keeping a lot of the debris consumed. They're going to make sure that there's a little bit of turbulence when it comes to moving around the nutrient and sediment as they do burrow down into the sea floor, especially in those sandier areas like around our dive site. But with these animals, they do have unique dots that sit just behind what we call their spiracles. You can see that really large round surface around the eye area. And with these different dots, they are like freckles, they are like fingerprints, they are unique to each individual. So we can directly use these and these photographs to identify what individuals are in the area and also how long they are found within that region too. So this is, when it comes to photo ID, a game changer when it comes to marine work. So we're able to operate our data collection on boats with our clients. We aren't doing anything that's risky. So we're able to make the most out of those trips when we're out on the water. And also it is cost effective. All you need is a photo and a little bit of time. So currently what we are looking at is a 10-year distribution. So we're going through the information from 2014 all the way up to last year. We're creating a catalog of known individuals and it's going to help us identify the residence time. So how long are these individuals staying in our area? How are they utilizing our bay? We can see seasonality. Are there changes throughout our season? Is there a difference between our summer months and our winter months? And also, just like we did with our bronze whalers, explore the relationship to our oceanic conditions. So how is temperature playing a role in their distribution and their presence around our cage? What effect is dissolved oxygen having with this? But you can see with the photos on the screen, all of these are the same individuals. So you can nicely see there, those little dots that are situated just on the top of their head. That is going to be the key factor into identifying whether it is the same individual or a new one that is working in the area. So that is a bit of work that we're doing and we're currently making good progress on that. So I'm excited to see what we do find. Another initiative that we do have is regular BRUV deployment. So BRUV does stand for Baited Remote Underwater Video Systems. So basically what you will have is a metal rig. On one side, there will be a bait canister, and on the other side, a GoPro or any other camera that can be recording underwater. So within our Dyer Island ecosystem, we do have 5 sites that we regularly monitor. And specifically, the most important one is the one that is situated right next to the island. So the island is classed as a nature reserve, and every quarter we will go through and make sure that we are getting these videos. So what we are hoping to see is the species diversity. How many different species can you find? So that can range from our different fish. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we do have an octopus. We do have one of our shy shark species, some silverfish. But if you look over to the right-hand side, sometimes it gives us even our apex predators coming through. So that is the broad-nosed seven-gill that I spoke about, one of those prehistoric-looking sharks and a fantastic predator as well. So they are known to predate on a wide range of different species, but we can then also assess the abundance. So how much of each species do you have? We can look at how the habitat is changing over a longer time, how these animals are interacting with their environment and with each other too. Of course, when you're utilizing a BRUV, it means it's just that video system that's down there. So we aren't within the water doing diving surveys, disrupting the different individuals that we will see. So it does provide us a full insight as to what is happening underneath our waves in a pretty effective and cost-effective way as well. And after each of these deployments, they will be down there underwater for about an hour. And once that footage is downloaded, we will go through and analyze, see what animals we're seeing, how many there are of each, and note down any of these notable behaviors too. And within our very small region, we're very blessed with the habitat types that we do have. So first off, we do have our kelp forests. So within temperate environments, kelp forests are pretty prevalent. So you find them here across the Western Cape within South Africa, but in California waters too, up towards the British Isles as well. But kelp forests, they do thrive in cooler environments, and kelp, it is a brown algae. But what it does is situate itself along the sea floor. So rather than a root system like other plants or other algae, instead it has what we call a holdfast. So that will attach itself to a rock. Any nutrients are then gained through absorption through the fronds. That's the other name for the leaves. And for the species that we do have within our local environment, it is also known as sea bamboo. And they have a fantastic growth rate, growing at around 1 centimeter per day. So they do support a whole host of different marine species. So just like in a terrestrial forest, at each level of your kelp forest, you will have a different community that is seeing support. So where you have your holdfast situated to the sediment, to the substrate along the bottom layer, there will be some bottom dwelling animals. So we'll have our starfish, some sea urchins. As you make your way up, we will have some of those fish. And then of course those leaf systems, those are going to be supporting some other animals as well. But with that hollow center that you can find with the kelp, it does mean it's able to float upright, to have those leaves at the surface of the water for maximum exposure to sunlight. So they can have successful photosynthesis and then facilitate that really fast growth rate that we do see. But then moving on to our next one, we do have rocky reefs. So these will be submerged layers of rock. They're going to provide a refuge for fish species across different lifespans. So that can be from their juvenile stages up to their adult spaces where they're able to utilize that area for spawning. It will be inhabited by different algae. We'll have some invertebrates. You can see we got some sea anemones and sea urchins within that picture. And within shallower reefs, they also do allow the development of that food web base because they're able to support the algae. So that photosynthetic algae is going to be that basis of the food web within that area. And just like we have underneath our dive site, there's also our sandy sediments. So these will be deposits that are brought in by stronger currents, and typically they're going to be utilized by animals that do have a burrowing technique. So it is an environment that's going to provide a safe space for species to have those adaptive techniques when it comes to their camouflage. They can bury into the sediment. Think of a lot of ray species, maybe some flounders. They're going to bury in and make sure they do have that protection as well. So within a very small area, we can have all of these different habitats crossed over, and our BRUVs will identify how these different environments are exposed to different species and how they are utilizing that area. But one of our interesting bits of work that did come through our BRUV work was this last publication, which was December last year. So this looked into the freezing behavior of capped sharks. So that is what we call crypsis. So initially, when we did have our BRUV research done, majority of these cat sharks and these shy sharks, they would be seen actively swimming around in a sort of technique that we call foraging. So you can see over 97% of the time they were actively moving around, sometimes resting along the bottom. So they do use a technique called buccal pumping. So when they rest along the bottom of the seafloor, they have these external gill flaps. So they can move these gill flaps without moving the rest of their body. So it allows them to rest on the seafloor, actively pump their gills, have water flow to allow them continuous oxygen transfer. But what was found through these last bits of brubs that we looked at was when a potential predator came into sight, specifically within these videos, it was the silhouette of Cape fur seals and smoothhounds. It not only caused the animal to drop to the floor of that sediment and stay still, but it actually caused that buccal pumping to stop, which was something that hadn't necessarily been noted. So for these little cat sharks and shy sharks, in the presence of a predator, they're essentially holding their breath until that animal moves out of their eyesight. And with these animals, they do have fantastic camouflage techniques when it comes to their pattern and their coloration as well. So by lying down, staying extremely still and blending into their sediment, it means that they can actively avoid predation. And this is not something that we would have seen if we were down diving. So with these videos, you can go back and look at them time and time again. You can see the change from your earlier videos up to where we stand in current days. See how your environment has changed, how your species abundance has changed. And of course, from that point, you can put conservation efforts into practice to further protect those ecosystems and the inhabitants of them as well. But here at our Marine Dynamics Basis and the Dyer Island Conservation Trust, we are responsible for all of the strandings and necropsy responses within the greater Overstrand area. So that is our municipal area. So when it comes to marine life, we do understand there's a lot of threats when it comes to discarded fishing gear. So that is typically what we call ghost fishing gear. It is fishing gear that is no longer in use. This can be from a broader scale when it comes to trawling nets, but even as simple as discarded fishing line from fishermen that are either fishing recreationally or just to sustain themselves. There will be plastic ingestion. It is no secret that plastic is making its way into our waters through either nurdles, so there's really, really small individuals when it comes to ingestion of this, larger plastic bags mistaken by sea turtles as jellyfish, but then also targeted fishing as a result of failed catch and release. So for any recreational fishing that may happen, this is for the purpose of sport, for angling. When it comes to the competitions of these sharks, they do tend to be one of the prize objects when it comes to this. And here you can see in the images that we have over on the right hand side or the left hand side even, this is a short fin mako shark. So this is a pelagic species and actually the fastest shark that we have in our oceans. 75 kilometers per hour is the rate that these sharks are able to swim at, which is astounding speeds. They are absolutely amazing. One of my favorite sharks as well. So a very harrowing moment when you do have this individual lying in front of you on a necropsy table, and it was identified that the result of its death was a failed catch and release. So there was a hook hole just behind its gills and a little slit where you could see a gaff had been used to remove that gill. And at the time that it was reported, the death of this animal, we were on our way to pick it up. By the time we had arrived, the jaws had been fully removed from the animal as well. So even in its death, it is being exploited for the purpose of those ornamental trades as well. And it is something that is classed as illegal too. So you can see our sharks, even from the point of it being caught and released to the point of having its jaws removed, there are going to be different factors that are placing imminent pressures on these animals, but we won't waste these opportunities when it comes to necropsies. So even at the time, it is pretty heartbreaking to see one of, the ocean's apex predators lying in front of you, but it does provide us a fantastic opportunity to gain insight into these animals so we can get those specific measurements. It's going to build on that knowledge of what we already know, but then we can understand their internal workings. So for most of these individuals, we will go through the stomach contents as well to understand their last meal, what they last predated on, to see if there's any plastic ingestion, anything else that can supply us with a little more understanding as to what is causing these deaths. So in terms of the necropsies that we do have, we can build a bit of a repertoire on, okay, these were natural causes, or this was a human impact as well. So it lets us know what is in our area, but then also how anthropogenic impacts are reducing their environment. But moving on to our other side, so as mentioned, it's not just shark cage diving we operate. So we do have our whale watching vessel that goes through and views our marine big five in the area. So on our whale boats, there are also active bits of data collection that are noted across different cetaceans. So we're very lucky with where we are situated. We do have exposure to 3 different whale species. So our first one we do have is the Brydes whale. So it's spelled Brydes, and this is an individual that tends to be found all year round within our waters. So it's one of the only whale species that will be feeding throughout the year. For all of the whales that we do see, they are classed as baleen whales. So they are filter feeders, or they will be feeding on smaller schooling fish. Each of them do have their own different adaptation to have a suitability to their prey items. So for the Brydes whale, they will skim feed through the water, maybe lunge feed as well, but they have these grooves and these slits that are situated along the bottom of that bottom jaw. So as they open up their mouth, just like a pelican, it does bellow out, so they can really get a nice big mouthful. They'll expel any of the excess water, leaving just behind the prey items within their mouth. But with these Brydes whales, seeing them all year round, we do want to understand a little bit more about our South African population. So one of the bits that we do is photo ID of that dorsal fin. So this is supporting studies of our South African population. It is currently being completed by a PhD student at the University of Cape Town. But we do also sit along the migratory corridor for 2 additional species, and that is our humpback whale and also the southern right whale. So for the humpbacks, they are passing their way through as they make their way up to Mozambican waters. It'll be a little bit warmer that side, but these are fantastic animals to see. They are known as the acrobats of the ocean. They sing, they dance. They are absolutely beautiful, and with these individuals we can also apply photo identification. But what we do want is the underside of their tail. So that is also what we know as the fluke. So each of those patterns underneath that fluke are unique to each individual. So for any photos that we do get of these tails, it will be uploaded to a site that is called Happy Whale. So they do take on citizen science initiatives, so any public can upload any photos that they have of these flukes. And behind scenes, there will be individuals that are matching these tails up to different sightings. So you can see the migrations of these animals. You can see whether there's been a re-sighting a little bit further down the coastline or in a completely different continent as well. So humpback whales are found in pretty much all oceans of our world. So they do have a very large distribution, but a really fantastic and easy way to see how they are migrating through our different areas. Then we do have our southern rights. So we are slowly coming into our whale season now. Typically late July up to early August, that is when we will have an increase in the number of species, but specifically they come to our grounds within Gansbaai for the purpose of breeding and calving. So it essentially turns into a nursery habitat. You're going to have mothers and calves that are situated along the coastline. So for these mothers, they do go on a very, very strict diet while being within South African waters. So they themselves won't feed. They are feeding on krill, and this isn't something that we have in abundance here within South Africa, but more towards the southern oceans. But her main purpose whilst being here in South Africa is to provide all of her time and energy into making sure their calves receive enough milk and enough protein to fatten up and begin their migratory journey down towards those cooler southern waters again. So they need a lot of fat layers to survive those cooler waters, and also a lot of energy to make that long trip as well. But when it comes to whales, what we are going to do when it goes to their ID is assist with the annual count. So this is in direct work with the whale research unit that operates here within South Africa. So they do count the number of individuals, and this can be identified by what we call the callosities. So you can see over on the left-hand side, that is the raised white bumps. So those are formed actually in the same places that we would grow facial hair, along the chin, like a mustache, eyebrows, and then they are typically then colonized by either whale lice or a few other crustaceans as well. They will sit on there, form that white coloration, but each individual is going to have its own callosity pattern. So we can take photos from an aerial view and count how many individuals are coming through, see whether it's the same ones that will reside within the area or not. And this was able to help identify a change and fluctuation in the mating patterns of the southern rights. So for a few years, we will see an increase where we have more individuals. There's an increase in the mating numbers, an increase in the number of calves. then based on the following years, we will start seeing some troughs, as there is a recovery time needed for each mother before she can then bear her next calf as well. So rather than see it as, oh my gosh, there's a big decline in these whales, we know it is that mating pattern that operates throughout the next few years. But with whales as well, they are very important. So there is a process known as the whale pump. So it constitutes of 3 different factors. Even just the movement of whales, it does help transfer a lot of nutrients within that water, especially as they are making their way through migratory patterns and pathways through that open ocean. As we mentioned, very, very scarce in terms of its life within that region. And when it comes to the whale pump as well, when it comes to their discards of their feces as well, within that it is very, very nutritionally rich. So that is going to be suspended within the water column, help bring up any of those nutrients that are going to help that basis of the food web. It's going to be utilized by that phytoplankton to create its own food to then support the next layer of the ecosystem. And naturally, in the cause of their death, just like the phytoplankton sinking down to deeper waters, these whale carcasses are going to sink down and they can support a very, very large ecosystem that is down there in our deep sea. So it'll be fed on a whole host of different animals and break down. That carbon is going to be stored again within that sediment at the bottom. So you can see from the smallest individual on the food chain, that phytoplankton, even up to some of the biggest species we can find within our oceans, all of them are vital to maintaining that carbon cycle, to bringing in any of that excess carbon and storing it, keeping it within balance within that oceanic ecosystem. But then moving on to another species that we do have, I spoke about our African penguins. You can see now a stark comparison between that top image and the one that is found along the bottom. So these were both taken on Dyer Island. So even just visually, you can see the extent in which we have had a major reduction in these African penguins. So over on Dyer Island, it's clear to see even from the photos, we are now working with 1% of the original population that we started with. A heartbreaking number. And unfortunately, these declines are as a direct result of human threats. So historically, guano was collected specifically from the early 1900s to, I would say, around the late 1960s. This guano was collected for the purpose of agricultural fertilizer. But the main issue with clearing up that guano, it was around 6 meters high. This is what these African penguins are utilizing for their nesting substrate. So without that guano, there was no substrate for them to burrow into. So any eggs that were laid were open to predation, open to the elements, and that is where there was a major decline in hatching success. So from this point, it meant they were open to a lot of the predators such as kelp gulls and also a few of the other coastal bird species such as skuas. They were actively able to go out and feed on those individuals, and they didn't have that temperature regulation either. So they aren't able to bury into the harder rock that does make up the island. They need that guano. It's soft, it's malleable, they can get into it. It provides a nice warm environment to help incubate those eggs, but also protect them. Then there was a stage where eggs were considered a delicacy. So people were directly collecting these eggs for the purpose of their next meal, and African penguin eggs were actually served on the Titanic as well. So this is something that has been utilized and fed on through those times, but you can imagine, I'm sure, removing hundreds of thousands of these eggs, you're going to see a major decline. And for a lot of these penguins, they will continue to try to have a successful hatchling. So if you are continuously removing these eggs, you're going to wear down their energy. They're going to keep producing eggs until they do have a viable chick. So a very, very sad individual to go through and not have a viable production when it is their life's purpose to make sure that they are maintaining their population numbers. But modern day now, we do see oil spills, also the removal of their food sources. So penguins are able to swim a good few kilometers out into our waters to find a food source, but when they're being pushed further than their limits in order to find that food, you're going to see weakened individuals. They need to come back and feed their chicks. So we are going to see declines based on this, and that is one of the modern issues that we are facing. And also their neighbors over on Giza Rock, these Cape Verde seals, they are also known to predate now on these penguins. So this is also thought to be a result of them not being able to access their food sources. These natural environments, these natural animals, they aren't able to compete with these commercial fisheries at the rate that they are pulling out all of these fish in the numbers, not allowing the ecosystem to recover. So a major decline and an increase in competition between us and the animals that we have within the waters. So for the Cape Fur seals, they will predate on the African penguins, but that is only for the purpose of their stomach contents. So they won't consume the bird themselves, they just see them as a live lunchbox. They want to go through, they'll just get those contents. Hopefully there's some fish inside for them. But of course, a very unnecessary death, especially when we're at the stage where every penguin does count. But through our Dyer Island Conservation Trust, we have started our African penguin and seabird sanctuary. So with our African penguins, just last year, they were reclassed as critically endangered. That is one step away from extinction on the IUCN Red List conservation, okay? So you can see they are at the brink, the last brink of their survival. And with our African penguin and seabird sanctuary, this was opened around 10 years ago, and we do provide temporary care to any diseased individuals, those that have been displaced, maybe a little bit further down the coastline than they should be, any that are facing injuries that can be from seal bites or any of the other injuries, maybe some bird flu, any that are oiled, and it will be put into the sanctuary and provide them a temporary home, 5-star veterinary service. So we do have a vet that operates here, and we do have Tolani, who is the penguin whisperer. He is fantastic with these animals. He has put pretty much his life's work's dedication into ensuring the survival of these African penguins. And what this is helping is it's contributing to our conservation management plan. So we're hoping to stabilize and maintain these population numbers. So whilst having the sanctuary, we do also have our African penguin nesting project. So we have created these artificial housing structures, and that is going to mean we're able to provide them a safe space to stay. So on the islands, on our colony, but also to the wider South African colonies, to Namibia, we do provide these houses, and it means the penguins will have protection when it comes to laying those eggs, those hatchlings, those chicks. They are going to be well protected within that further environment too, and we have had success with this. Also, over the island, we do have a dedicated team of rangers who are doing daily walks. They're able to provide immediate care for penguins that are on the island. Otherwise, they will alert apps. They'll let them know if collection is needed, and either our commercial boats or our specific rubber ducks will be sent out towards the island in order to collect them, take them to the penguin sanctuary in hopes that we can revive them, send them back out into their environment to further protect them from that point as well. But it's not just our oceans that we have within our environment. So we're very, very lucky with the diversity we have in the area. And one of the adjacent ecosystems that we do have is our estuary. So this is Eilenkral Estuary. It's just off to the side of where we actually operate our dive site when it comes to shark cage diving. So with an estuary, this is where our oceans are being met by fresh water. So it is what we describe as a brackish environment. You have a mixture of fresh water and salt water. It's going to be a lot of mixing. There's going to be a lot of nutrient enrichment from the nutrients that are brought down from higher ends, and it does provide a whole host of different ecosystem services. So we will operate weekly monitoring that happens every single week. So day in, day out, we're going to try our best to really get out into the environment and note down the water properties. So just like we do on the shark boat, we'll note down the temperature, the dissolved oxygen, but we'll also have a little bit of an indication into the salinity, so how salty the water is, and also the pressure and conductance from that point as well. But it's not just the water that we're looking at, we're also utilizing animals as an indicator of how healthy this environment is. So we will do our bird counts as well to identify the abundance and the diversity of the different bird species in the area. But what this helps us do is identify any seasonal changes, but also any human impacts on our local ecosystem. So you can see on the top left-hand corner, there is a holiday resort that is very closely associated with this estuary. And most estuaries will have settlements along the way. That is historically how humanity moved itself. They wanted to be close to water sources. It meant they did have good food sources available and also water sources a little bit further up once you have your freshwater environment. But we are able to see the difference between the sites that are very close to humans, how they interact with it. Based on when we move further up the estuary, there's less human disturbance. We'll see an increase in the abundance of the birds, increase in their diversity too. And that is completely vital when it comes to a lot of the migratory species that we'll have in the area as well. But to go into a few of the services that these estuaries do provide for us. So of course, it's not just the environment that's benefiting from an environmental standpoint. Economically, we are gaining from this as well. So for a lot of different species, they will be a prey source. So these environments are often utilized as what we call a nursery habitat. So it's a safe space for a lot of juvenile species to come through and be born. They will develop into their next life stage, either moving back into the freshwater environment or into our oceanic ecosystem. So for a lot of prey items, that is easy pickings for some other larger fish species too, but also survive the local community with food and bait production and also flood control. This is a very, very important factor when it comes to estuaries. So along the banks, there's often a wetland environment. This allows a lot of water retention. So if you have higher rainfalls within that time, all of this water is going to spread out into the wetland and then permeate the soil, stay within that ecosystem rather than branching out and wrecking any of the landfills or land uses around that local area too. It'll provide jobs. So if you're directly fishing from that ecosystem, if you're working in conservation, anyone like this, it does provide a whole host of different opportunities when it comes to income. But one of the main factors is this refuge and migratory corridor. So we do have species that we describe as diadromous. So that means they either move from freshwater to saltwater or vice versa, but they use this estuary as a pathway between those two environments, and that is paramount to their survival. Think of salmon. They're going to make their way up and down these ecosystems, and that is specifically key when it comes to developing through their spawning stage, through their juvenile stage, before they make their way back to assist with their breeding and their spawning as well. So this is why it is particularly important that we understand the health of this environment and also make sure it is carefully monitored. It is so close and so heavily impactful on our local coastal bay too. So we're covering all bases when it comes to our conservation here. But these are some of the bird species that we will be seeing in our area. So some of these are migratory, some of them can be found all year round. But we have kingfishers, we have some waders. Some of the waders will travel all the way from European quarters down towards our local ecosystem for the purpose of their breeding season. So it's very important, after a long journey, they do have a safe and healthy environment in which they can rest and that they can help reproduce to assist their population numbers as well. But then we'll also have a few different coastal species such as our terns and our gulls from that aspect too. So when you have an healthy ecosystem, these animals are going to be a direct indicator as to how your environment is doing. We're utilizing these birds as key indicators as to whether we need to up our ante when it comes to these conservation efforts, or if the measurements that are in place already are being effective as well. But to go into just a few of the other extra efforts that we do have. So we do operate regular beach cleanups, be that with our volunteers or our local community, helping spread education. We do have our fishing line bin project. So this is one of our biggest initiatives. So hundreds of these fishing line bins can now be found along the South African coastline, and it's encouraging fishermen to discard their unwanted lines. So it doesn't end up wrapping around birds, it doesn't end up being ingested by these animals. Rather, it is then put into these bins and then collected by us to then be recycled. And we have had a collection of hundreds of kilometers of this fishing line. So there has been major success when it comes to this project. We also then did have Project Storm. So these were then put catchment nets over those storm drains to trap any of that litter, any of that unwanted refuge from entering our oceanic ecosystems. So that would then be sorted to understand which companies are contributing to this, what type of plastic is the problem, to then assist when it comes to greater awareness, helping people to make informed decisions on what they're utilizing, what are they buying, how can they recycle it. And one of our biggest projects is also our community empowerment. So this is through our educational program called DEEP. This is a 3-year program where we educate children from local schools. So it is 3 years, so not just a short-term holiday subject. We are helping enforce this over years to come. So building our next generation of maybe biologists, maybe ocean and conservation eco-economists. So we're going to make sure that it is instilled within their being. It's going to be part of the community. You can expose people to environments they didn't even know existed. So if people don't know about something, they tend to not care. So this is where our education comes in from our mottos as well. But that was just a brief bit from that. And when it comes to our work and our conservation, it is all a collaborative effort. So within marine dynamics, from our whale watching to our shark cage diving, the academy that we do have with our volunteers and our interns, and then of course our Dyer Island Conservation Trust. One cannot exist without the other. Our shark cage diving, whale watching, it informs a lot of the decisions for our Dyer Island Conservation Trust. Some of that money is pushed into it, but then without our research, we wouldn't be able to conserve the animals that we do rely on when it comes to our ecotourism practices too. But if you guys did want to stay in touch and understand what else we have going on in our area, you can head to our Dyer Island Conservation Trust website. We do post active blogs that can be from our necropsies, any of our research updates as well. Anything that we find along the way, all of it will be posted on there. And then of course you can follow us on our social media platforms too. So Marine Dynamics will pretty much cover all bases on that as well. But guys, that's me rambled on about that. But thank you so much for listening. And I hope you guys learned something from this as well. And yeah, if there's any questions, I'm definitely happy to open the floor to that as well. But thank you.